I got my copy of Reason magazine here, and it says what is it, the Deregulator? The Regulator? I could believe he might be a deregulator, but I don't think he's a deregulator, because I think you'd have to have philosophy to be a deregulator. And I think this president is kind of an unphilosophical fucking idiot, along with his pal Steve Bannon, who in this episode of Reason magazine says that it's all that Cato Institute stuff and Austrian economics, it's all theoretical. They're not living in the real world. But what real world is he living in that he calls himself an enemy of the administrative state, but from no philosophical basis? From just the philosophical basis of an angry retard that's like running away from a swarm of bees? Is that the level of philosophy that this White House engages at? It's kind of funny because, Republicans all, in order to be Republicans, they would have to be in favor of Lockean property rights, because that was the core principle of the Founding Fathers. But they don't include drugs as property. And although the First Amendment says that you have a right to be secure in your persons, papers, and effects, effects are the reference to Lockean property. But apparently, Republicans don't believe that Lockean property rights, that it applies to effects. So they don't believe that effects include useful recreational drugs like alcohol. Oh no, they do think alcohol is included in effects. That's a very dangerous drug. It kills brain cells on contact. What about safer drugs like marijuana, like hallucinogenics, like even cocaine, and heroin? If you know the proper dosage, those plant-based drugs are all safer than alcohol, because safety is determined by dosage. And all drugs have a safe dose, otherwise they'd be totally unattractive to all users. Users don't want to kill themselves, right? But these unphilosophical pricks who run the Republican Party and have run it into the ground to the point where we can elect an unprincipled, unphilosophical moron like this as our president, because he goes around beating his chest and claims he's going to take action, as if that was the problem, is the other politicians with stupid political solutions not taking action. So they've run the party into the ground, and they're still claiming that philosophy is the problem. Hey, Republicans, hey, Democrats, why don't you smarten the fuck up and get philosophy? Why don't you stop running away from it and actually adopt a constructive philosophy, like the philosophy of our founding fathers, of the founders of this country? Why don't you do that? Why don't you adopt the philosophy of the abolitionists who straightened out the internal contradictions in our Constitution? That'd be a smart philosophy to adopt, right? Because you don't even have to make enemies of any political minority. You could do that and you'd have the moral high ground. And lots of people would support you, who don't currently support you. It'd be a win-win. But instead you're supporting these fucking idiotic assholes like Jeff Sessions, who's been an enemy of the common law his whole life. He's been an unphilosophical, unprincipled enemy of the common law his entire life. And that's the top law officer of the land? It's ridiculous. How unintelligent are you? And how much death, chaos, and suffering needs to happen in order for you to get just a shred, just a scrap of the philosophy that is our birthright in this country? We're the first philosophical nation, really. We're the first nation to codify property rights and to say that the individual should be defended from kings and tyrants. And instead you want to just impersonate the kings and tyrants by disavowing that birthright of philosophy. This is why it's so difficult to respect someone who calls themselves a Republican. because the Republicans are against a republic and the Democrats are against democratic elections. And the one good aspect of the stated other, the good aspect of the Democrats, is that they believe that ultimately that the decision should come down to the will of the people, right? And that should be through elections and jury trials in the legitimate formulation. And what they do is they gut that legitimate formulation because they take away jury trials and they try to say whatever the people vote for is legitimate. And that's what they teach in the government schools too. So that's why we have a nation of idiots. So even if the majority wants to build gas chambers and put all the Jews in them, the Constitution doesn't allow that, right? Now, why doesn't the Constitution allow that? Because of the common law. Remember how I mentioned Jeff Sessions and the common law? Well, the Bill of Rights refers to the common law, and the Supreme Court still says that. The Supreme Court says that the Constitution refers to the common law. Through court precedent, they've said that. And they never denied it at any point. At every point, the legitimate legal theory of the United States has stated that the common law is the basis for all criminal law. And that the reason why this country could flourish was because everyone could understand the common law. The common law requires injury to a specific identified party and intent to injure the same injured party. So not just a general intention to injure or a general carelessness. No, there has to be an actual injury to somebody in order for there to be a crime under the common law. This is the core principle that not just this country, but all of Western civilization is based on this. That means the United States, the Commonwealth countries, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, what was once the British Empire, that all of that could have been said to have been properly governed by a proper interpretation of the common law. And the proper interpretation was unambiguous and totally agreed upon for well over 100 years. The only conception, the only point of disagreement was who it applied to. Did it apply to all races? Yes, okay. There had to be violence in order to apply it to all races and to all subclasses. You know, it was never consistently applied, but there was never any question that when the common law was being applied to those that it applied to, it did in fact state that any crime had to have a corpus delicti. A corpus delicti, the body of the crime, is the full term. And Article 1, Section 9 of our Constitution still says that you have a right to habeas corpus. So the government has to show you the injury and show you the intent before you can be charged with any crime, before you can even be charged with the crime. And the Attorney General is supposed to fucking know that. But you've found like one of the few people that doesn't know that to be the Attorney General. And it's not just Trump. Every president has been worse than the preceding president. Every president has applied a worse tyrant to the office of Attorney General. They've all gone further and further away from the simple notion of the common law that's so simple that the common man is supposed to be able to easily understand it and abide by it, right? The common businessman, when you walk down the street and go to work, ride the bus, go to work, you don't have many instances where you even have the possibility of injuring someone accidentally. So it's pretty easy to avoid obviously intentionally injuring someone to the point where a jury would say, yeah, you've intentionally caused harm enough to be worthy of a court case to that person. So how do the judges and people like Jeff Sessions get around that? They simply have said that the common law doesn't apply, and they're going to apply statute law. They don't recognize the right to habeas corpus, and they stopped recognizing it, and then they just said to jury members, they question them before they sit on the jury. And if you're a dummy, you get to sit on the jury. If you're a dummy who doesn't know that by being called to serve as a jury member, you're supposed to find the two parts of the criminal corpus. You're supposed to find injury and intent, and if you can't find any injury and intent in the defendant's actions, you're supposed to say not guilty. Instead of that, the judge instructs them wrongly to find the person guilty if they broke some arbitrary statute law that Congress voted on. Well, guess what? If you degrade the electoral system to the extent that our electoral system has been degraded, and you make it so hard to get on the ballot, you require 50,000 signatures in a place like Illinois, and you claim that the requirement is only 25,000 signatures, but if they come in with anything less than 40,000 signatures, you enact a signature challenge through a crony, and you remove them from the ballot. That's so complex that the average person can't understand what's going on and doesn't follow it, and they're bored by it. They're bored by it. They make participating in democracy very boring and bureaucratic, and they say, we're not doing away with democracy, we're just making a procedural change. You just have to file a little paperwork. Well, that's how you take away a constitutional republic. That's how you apply a filter, and this is an important concept. It's a statistical filter placed in front of the offices of power. And it's a statistical filter that filters out the intelligent from the juries. Now, they're not saying that a smart person can't get on a jury. They're not saying it's illegal. They're not directly outlawing it. They're just making it really unlikely